The world was made of rock and sky, and Anjin was a small, solitary figure moving between them. For 30 years, the Himalayan peaks had been his parish, their unforgiving slopes his sanctuary. He was a wildlife ranger, a title that felt too formal for what he really was. A guardian of ghosts. And in these high, thin-aired places, the gray ghost, the snow leopard, was the most sacred phantom of all. The air was sharp, so cold it felt like breathing powdered glass. Anjin pulled his worn wool collar tighter, his eyes scanning the vast, silent amphitheater of stone and ice. He was tracking a ghost now, but not the one he revered. He'd found the signs 2 days ago near the tree line, the faint impression of a cheap, mass-produced boot, a discarded cigarette butt, the subtle disturbance of rocks that spoke of a hurried passage. Poachers. The word was a desecration in this pristine wilderness. They were hunting for pelts, for bones to be ground into bogus medicine, seeking to turn the mountain's living spirit into a commodity. He followed the trail upward, into the leopard's domain. It was a pilgrimage into a vertical world, a place of treacherous scree slopes and knife-edge ridges where one misplaced step could send a man plummeting into the void. He moved with the unhurried, mountain-bred gait that consumed miles with deceptive ease. His senses were alive, attuned to the subtle language of the landscape. He saw where a pika had scurried for cover, where a lammergeier had cast its shadow, and where the poacher's careless path had scarred the delicate alpine flora. He found the trap on the 3rd day, tucked into a natural funnel of rock that any passing animal would be forced to use. It was a cruel, simple device, a leg-hold trap with rusty steel jaws, tethered by a heavy chain to a deeply set iron stake. It was a thing of brutal, mindless efficiency, an ugly stain of human greed on the sacred ground. And it had found its victim. Curled in the lee of a granite boulder, as still as the stone itself, was a snow leopard cub. It couldn't have been more than 6 months old, its coat a smoky gray, dappled with the dark, smudged rosettes of its kind. Its oversized paws, designed for silent movement on snow, were a sign of the powerful hunter it would one day become. But not today. Today, its front right paw was caught fast in the serrated grip of the trap. Anjin's heart, usually a steady, slow drum in his chest, clenched with a cold fury. The cub was alive, but barely. Its eyes, the color of a winter sky, were wide with a mixture of terror and exhausted resignation. It didn't snarl or hiss as he approached, a sign of how depleted it was. It simply watched him, trembling, a faint, shallow puff of condensation leaving its nostrils with each breath. He crouched, his movements slow and deliberate, murmuring in the soft, low tones he used to gentle, spooked livestock. "Shh, little ghost. Hush now. I am here to help you. I am not the one who did this." The logic of the situation was a screaming alarm in his head. A cub meant a mother. And a snow leopard mother, deprived of her young, was a force of nature as formidable and unpredictable as an avalanche. She would be close. She would be watching. Every instinct told him he was standing in the crosshairs of an unseen rifle. He scanned the towering cliffs and ridges that encircled him, their surfaces a chaotic jumble of cracks and ledges, 1,000 perfect hiding places. He saw nothing. The silence was absolute, profound, and more terrifying than any roar. He had to work fast. He laid his pack down, his hands working with practiced familiarity as he retrieved a set of small, powerful bolt cutters and a thick leather blanket. He approached the cub, keeping his body low. The cub flinched, pulling back against the chain, a pathetic whimper escaping its throat as the trap's jaws bit deeper. "Easy, easy," Anjin soothed, his voice a continuous calming rumble. He gently laid the blanket over the cub's head and body, both to calm it and to protect himself from its sharp claws and teeth should it panic. The mechanism of the trap was crude. He had to force the jaws apart. He inserted the tips of the bolt cutters not to cut, but to use as a spreader, a makeshift jaws of life. It was agonizingly slow work. The metal groaned in protest, Anjin's knuckles were white, his muscles straining against the tension of the trap's powerful springs. All the while, he felt the weight of unseen eyes burning into his back. He was exposed, vulnerable, his attention completely focused on the task. The mother could be on him in seconds, a silent, gray blur of righteous fury. With a final grunting effort and a loud crack, the jaws sprang open. Anjin swiftly pulled the cub's paw free. He unwrapped the blanket. The cub lay still, its freed paw swollen and bleeding, but he could see the bones were intact. It was badly bruised, perhaps sprained, but not broken. A small mercy. He couldn't leave it. The cub was too weak to travel far, its injury a death sentence in this terrain. The mother, even if she returned, might be unable to move it, and the poachers could be back. His duty was clear. He had to get the cub to a place of safety. He knew of a den site a few miles away, a sheltered cave on a high, protected ledge that the leopards in this territory sometimes used. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot the cub had. He gently scooped the small leopard into his arms. It was surprisingly heavy, a dense bundle of muscle and bone. It was too weak to struggle, merely pressing itself into the warmth of his jacket, its cold nose tucked into the crook of his arm. He stood up, the weight of his decision as heavy as the cub itself, and began the trek. As if on cue, the sky began to change. The crisp, clear blue overhead softened to a milky white. The wind picked up, carrying with it the first delicate, crystalline flakes of snow. The journey was arduous. The terrain was steep, and the added weight of the cub threw off his balance. The falling snow, at first a gentle dusting, quickly thickened into a swirling curtain, reducing visibility to a few dozen feet. The world shrank to a small, moving circle of gray rock and white snow. It was then that he saw her for the first time. It was a flicker of movement on a ridge high above him to his left, a momentary break in the pattern of rock and snow. He froze, his eyes straining against the flurry. For a second he saw a shape, low-slung, powerful, impossibly fluid, and then it was gone, vanished as if it had been a trick of the light, an apparition born of the swirling snow and his own frayed nerves. But he knew it wasn't. It was her, the mother. She was shadowing him. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the layers of his training and experience. This was not a hunt. It was an escort, a silent, menacing procession. He was a thief carrying her stolen treasure, and she was the rightful owner, deciding on her own terms when and how to reclaim it. He pushed on, his heart a frantic bird in his chest. He clutched the cub tighter, its small, warm body a strange comfort against his own terror. He began to talk to it, his voice low and steady, hoping the sound would carry on the wind, a message to the phantom on the cliffs. "You'll be all right, little one. We're going to a safe place. A good den, warm and dry. Your mother is watching. She knows, she has to know I mean no harm." He saw her again, this time on the other side, a fleeting silhouette against the darkening sky. She moved with a silence that was supernatural, a ghost gliding over the treacherous ground as easily as a thought. She never made a sound, she never took a direct path toward him. She simply paralleled his journey, a constant, unnerving presence in the periphery of his vision. The psychological pressure was immense. It was a war of nerves, played out on a vertical battlefield in a gathering blizzard. Every step he took was a gamble, every gust of wind a potential prelude to an attack. He finally reached the most perilous part of the route, a narrow, wind-swept ledge, barely wider than his boots, with a sheer 1,000-foot drop on one side and a vertical rock face on the other. The snow had made the path slick and treacherous. This was a place where there was no room for error and no possibility of escape. He paused at the edge, gathering his courage. And as he looked up, she was there. She was no longer a fleeting glimpse or a distant shadow. She stood on a rock outcrop not 50 feet above him, in plain sight. The snow swirled around her, clinging to her thick, pale coat, but she was a figure of absolute stillness and power. Her pale, luminous eyes were fixed on him, burning with a cold, white fire. Her long, thick tail, a vital counterbalance hung low. Her muscles were coiled, a study in lethal potential. This was the end of the line, the final confrontation. Anjin froze, his body rigid. He held the cub out slightly, an offering, a plea. His mind was blank with terror. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't run. He couldn't fight. His life was now entirely in her paws. He braced for the charge, for the explosive, silent launch that would send him cartwheeling into the abyss. But it never came. The mother leopard tilted her head. She looked at him, at the cub in his arms, and then back at him. A sound left her throat, so soft it was almost lost in the wind. It wasn't a growl or a snarl. It was a low, breathy chuff, a puff of air that is the closest thing a snow leopard has to a purr. It is a sound of greeting, of non-aggression. Then, in a move that shattered Anjin's understanding of the wild, she turned. With deliberate, measured steps, she began to move, not away, but along the cliff face, descending a steep, almost invisible track that angled down toward the far end of the ledge he was on. She glanced back once, her eyes meeting his, and then continued. She was not retreating. She was leading. A wave of dizzying relief and profound disbelief washed over Anjin. He understood. It was a pardon, a gesture of trust so profound it felt like a physical blow. He took a shaky breath and followed, his boots finding purchase on the slick rock as he navigated the narrow ledge. He kept his eyes on her, the gray ghost guiding him through the storm. She led him to a fissure in the rock face, partially obscured by a recent rockfall. The den. It was perfectly sheltered from the wind and the snow. She stopped at the entrance, waiting. With hands that trembled, Anjin knelt and gently placed the cub on the ground. The little leopard, smelling its mother, stirred. It let out a small, mewing cry and took a few clumsy, limping steps toward the cave entrance. The mother leopard moved forward, meeting her cub with another soft chuff. She bent her head, nuzzling it with an infinite tenderness, her rough tongue licking its face, cleaning the snow from its fur. She checked its injured paw with a gentle nudge of her nose. She looked up at Anjin one last time. Her eyes, no longer burning with cold fire, held a look of deep, ancient, and unfathomable intelligence. It was a look that passed beyond threat or gratitude. It was a look of acknowledgement, a silent confirmation of a pact made and honored between two of the mountain's solitary guardians. Then, with a final, soft call to her cub, she turned and melted into the darkness of the den. Anjin stood alone on the ledge, the snow swirling around him, his body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline and cold. He was just a man again, small and insignificant against the vast, indifferent majesty of the Himalayas. But he felt transformed. He had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, escorted by the shadow itself. He had freed a ghost from a steel trap, and in return, its queen had granted him passage, a moment of impossible, transcendent grace. The memory of her pale eyes and the soft sound of her pardon in the storm would be a part of him forever, a secret he would carry through all his remaining days in the high, lonely kingdom of the snow leopard.